Welcome back. So I did a video today on Chicago and on their situation going to the deadline, and I thought, let's talk about Montreal. Let's talk about an Eastern team too while we're at it. I've talked about a lot of teams in the West. Let's talk about a team in the East, and we don't need to get into how far outside the playoffs they are. We don't need to get into their record. There's a lot of stuff we don't need to get into with the Montreal Canadiens at this point in the season because the season's kind of been done since, second week of the year? And it has been an absolute nightmare. This is a team that was supposed to be, at least in contention for a playoff spot. If they weren't going to make it, they were at least supposed to be close. And it hasn't been close. Their deadline cap space, again, this is something I'm tracking because at the deadline it tells you who can park some money, who might be able to retain some money. $6,697,646, courtesy of Cap Friendly. Now, in terms of extra draft picks, they do have the Ducks and Canes third-round picks. They have the Bolts fourth-round pick. They have the Blues seventh-round pick. In the trade that they made with the Arizona Coyotes for Dvorak, the agreement was that the worst of the two first-round picks between their own and Carolina would be the one going to Arizona. So it's Carolina's pick that goes to the Coyotes. That was the pick they got in exchange for not meeting the offer sheet for Jesperi Kotkaniemi. And the interesting thing is, this is a team that could use a Jesperi Kotkaniemi on the roster. Nobody on this team has broken double digits in goals yet. And they don't have, to me anyways, they don't have that depth down the middle you need. They don't have Danault anymore. They don't have Kotkaniemi. And so I think the question then becomes one of, okay, so what's the future going to be down the middle? Well, it is Nick Suzuki. He is the present and the future. I think Suzuki looked good at the All-Star game. I think he acquitted himself well. Future's still bright for him. But 44 games, 9 goals, 18 assists, 27 points. I think that's a little bit lower than people had hoped for from him offensively. Tyler Toffoli had a career year last year. Absolutely career year totals, and right after signing a contract with Montreal. So it made the contract look good. It made it look like Toffoli might be more of a 30-goal scorer than 20 this year. 33 games, 9 goals, 16 assists, 25 points. Hot and cold for Toffoli, but he looks like he's in 20-25 goal range if he was playing a full 80-game season, which is about average for him during his career. Jonathan Drouin, 32 games, 6 goals, 14 assists, 20 points. For Drouin, it's been another season of some frustration, right? Injuries and all of that. Of course, last year he had to spend time away from the team. So for Drouin, it's a matter of getting into a rhythm and playing enough games. And so I kind of feel bad for him because it doesn't feel like those totals are fair, considering how much time he missed last year and the overall state of the team this year. Arturi Lehkonen, who's an RFA this summer, 41 games, 7 goals, 12 assists, 19 points for Lehkonen. So, good depth player. On pace for about 40 points if he played a full 82 games. That's not bad. Josh Anderson, 33 games, 9 goals, 7 assists, 16 points at times. Excellent. And again, it's been a matter of just Montreal players not getting hot for long enough, often enough, and not collectively, right? We haven't had that period yet for Montreal where everything's firing on all cylinders and they look really good. Dvorak, 34 games, 7 goals, 9 assists, 16 points. I don't think Dvorak has given them down the middle what Danault has given the Kings or what Danault gave Montreal last season. And of course, giving up a first-round pick, even if it's a late first-rounder, it could be 32nd because it's the Canes' first-round pick. But it kind of hurts because it is supposed to be a deep draft. There's supposed to be a lot of really good players. I'm thinking like maybe 2015 levels of depth from just the way that it's been hyped up. And again, sometimes the draft class gets hyped up more than it should. And sometimes it gets more flack than it should get too. But this is supposed to be a really good draft. And you want to see more, extra draft picks for Montreal. A team that has not been shy about getting extra draft picks over the last couple of years. Hoffman, 29 games, 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points. I don't think Hoffman's had the effect that they had envisioned that he would have. I think they wanted, some more out of him than what we've seen so far. Evans, 36 games, 6 goals, 6 assists, 12 points. Jake Evans, I think, has been one of their better forwards. But I think with Evans, you're better off having him in the third line than in the top 6. Gallagher, 26 games, 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points. He has stated his desire to stay with the Montreal Canadiens, and he's not a free agent this summer or anything. So if they decided to move him, there's cap certainty for the team that would pick him up. But it sounds like he'd rather stick around and try to be part of the solution, right? Wideman, 31 games, 2 goals, 8 assists, 10 points. He's a UFA this summer. I would be kind of surprised if they don't rent him out. The number one guy on some of the trade boards is Ben Sherratt. That made sense early in the season. Sherratt got off to a very good start. It makes less sense to me now because in 41 games he has 5 goals, 4 assists. You don't measure Sherratt on his offense, of course. You measure him on the defensive side. It hasn't been a great picture. I think that if Sherratt's asking price, if Montreal's asking price for Sherratt is a first-round pick, and that's been the discussion again since near the start of the season that they want a first rounder. If they want a first rounder for Sherratt, I don't think that a team should trade a first round pick for Sherratt. I think on a contending team, Ben Sherratt's probably third pairing, and that's, again, and I'm a fan of Ben Sherratt, but when I hear it could be a first rounder for Sherratt, I don't see that as being a really good decision for a contending team necessarily. But Sherratt, he's got the physicality. He can be very good defensively, and he can put the puck in the net here and there as well. Teams will call, but again, I think a second-round pick, might be all right depending on where it is in the draft and all that. But a first, it's that time of year where things get kind of crazy, and you see the returns some of these guys are going to get, and we will be scratching our heads after the trade deadline. Savard, 42 games, 1 goal, 8 assists, 9 points. He was brought in part because Weber's not in the lineup. And losing Shea Weber has been huge for Montreal. Adding Savard is good defensively, but the presence that Savard gives you is not going to be what Shea Weber does. So not having Weber in the lineup has absolutely hurt them. I don't think they're a playoff team with Weber, but they definitely would have a better record if Weber was still in the lineup. Kulak, 38 games, 1 goal, 7 assists for him. Caulfield, of course, is the big story there too. Caulfield had a very decent part of the season that he played last year, and the playoffs, he was really good. So those things combined with his position in the draft as a first rounder and everything pointing to him being an elite level goal scorer in the NHL, and this year it just has not happened. 29 games, 1 goal, 7 assists, 8 points. And so you can hear when you watch a Montreal game, the announcers kind of rooting him on, and is this the game that's going to get him over the top? And, well, tonight he has 4 shots, so, he's due for breaking through. But the stats don't lie. He's only got the 1 goal so far. And Caulfield should be at the top of the priority list of the new general manager in terms of players they need to get figured out. Suzuki will be fine. Suzuki, while some of his stats this year aren't where you'd want them to be, he'll be fine. Caulfield, on the other hand, I do have some concerns with Caulfield. Paling, 30 games, 5 goals, 2 assists, 7 points. Paling, it's been okay, but again, how much upside is there for Paling from here? What do you expect from him next year? Where is he going to slot into the lineup? Romanov, 41 games, 2 goals, 5 assists for him. He's a restricted free agent this summer. It will be interesting to see how much he gets and for how long. I think Romanov is still a very good defenseman. Again, there's some players on this team that I think their stats are worse than they really should be based on their play. And I think Romanov's one of those guys that, playing in Montreal's probably dragged his stats down somewhat. Pizzetta's an RFA this summer as well. 30 games, 4 goals, 2 assists, 6 points. I think Pizzetta's played well enough to earn himself a shot at a fourth-line job next year. I do. I think Pizzetta has absolutely earned that. There's toughness there. He is better, I think, offensively than any of us might have thought he would be. The 4 goals in 30 games isn't, awe-inspiring or anything, but considering I'm talking about fourth-line minutes, if he can score 10 goals on the fourth line, that's just fine. That's pretty good production from your fourth line. And then there's Petrie. Petrie has kind of fallen off a cliff. 37 games, 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points. I do think Petrie was overrated in some of the previous seasons. I would hear people talking about he should be, maybe in the Norris conversation. I never really saw him as a Norris-level defenseman, but he was very, very good. And so this absolute nosedive from Petrie, it is rattling, to say the least. Petrie's been a very good defenseman. I think he can get back to being a very good defenseman. But again, once players get older, it happens, right? It happens. Guys get into their 30s and all of a sudden, You know, that guy who's a bargain one day, the next day you look at it and go, man, that contract seems a little high for his production. Then you've got Dauphin, 15 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. He's a UFA this summer. I would expect him to be rented out at the deadline. Niku, 13 games and just the 6 assists. Restricted free agent, cleared waivers. And so for Niku, I would not be surprised if they don't give him the qualifying offer and let him leave as a UFA this summer. Rem Pitlick has been a fascinating example of how, you know, some players end up bouncing around the league. 9 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points for him. He's a restricted free agent this summer in Minnesota. He played 20 games, 6 goals, 5 assists, 11 points, which is good. 20-goal pace, and they waived him. And, of course, Nashville traded him to Minnesota. So for Pitlick, he's bounced around a bit. Does Montreal have faith in Pitlick? And when you see a guy with 16 points in 29 games and see he's gone through waivers, the first thought I have is, so which part of his defensive game did Minnesota have a problem with where they felt they could waive him and risk losing him for nothing? For Montreal, honestly, he's been pretty good for them. I think he's played well. So we'll see if they decide to keep him around. Armia, 32 games, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points. Another player whose totals have not been where I think Montreal would want them to be or where he would want them to be. I like Yoel Armia. The numbers this year have not been great, but again, he's in there with Caulfield, Gallagher, Hoffman. There's a lot of players here that their totals haven't quite been where you would want them to be. So, keeping good company. Matthew Perot's had a hard time staying healthy. He's a UFA this summer, 14 games, 3 goals, and 1 assist. Again, it's a matter of if somebody calls at the deadline, likely on his way out. Ylonen, 7 games, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. Promising younger forward. Again, the question then becomes one of what's the ceiling? Where do you envision him being in the lineup? So new GM comes in, and you got to kind of chart this out for next year. You have to put on the board, okay, here's what we want things to look like next year. How many of these players you envision still being on the roster and what the plan is going to be. Because going to the deadline, I think it's important to have that kind of a plan. And Paquette, 24 games, just the 2 assists. He's a UFA this summer. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't move to a contender. I honestly would not be surprised to see Tampa Bay find a way to bring him back as a utility forward, as a guy who might be, you know, on their 4th line, and just in case there's injuries, that kind of thing. But I would be kind of surprised if Paquette doesn't move at the deadline. And when you look at the goaltending, it's interesting because Jake Allen, 5-16 and 2, 901 save percentage. The numbers aren't great. I don't think you'll find very many Montreal fans that complain about Jake Allen. They're aware that this team has not played well enough. The defense has not been very good. He's facing a lot of really good opportunities. So his 901 save percentage isn't great, but really the play of the team hasn't been either. Montembeault, 2-8-4 record, 891 save percentage, restricted free agent this summer. He's ended up playing far more than I think the Canadiens had hoped, and I say that because that means no Carey Price. Not having Carey Price, not having Shea Weber has cost this team some wins, and Montembeault, I still think Montembeault can be a decent goaltender. He's had some rough nights recently. Caden Primo, 1-5-1, 885 save percentage. I think Montreal would much rather have him playing in the AHL, getting his game in gear in Laval, and then bring him up at a later date. But again, without Carey Price, with the protocol situations we've had around the NHL, it has forced some guys into the lineup that maybe a team would rather not have in there already. And McNiven, no record for him, 571 save percentage, just a drop in the water for him. And so for Montreal, there will be some questions in goal, because with Carey Price, there is the chance that he comes out and says, I've been trying to rehab my knee, it's not working, I don't think I'm going to be able to return. That possibility is there. There's also that possibility that 2 weeks from now, he's standing in front of a microphone and saying, I feel great, I'm going to be good to return within the next few weeks. And maybe their goaltending by the end of the season features Carey Price, and some of those concerns for the future might go away. But Price is at that stage. He's at that age as well, where they need to decide, okay, so who's the next guy? They've been drafting a lot of goaltenders over the last 4 years. They've drafted a number of goaltenders. And so Primo may very well end up being the guy that they envision as being the next one, but there's others who could step in. Upcoming as well for them, really the star of the list. I mean, Norlinder may end up being a very good defenseman as well, but Caden Gooley looks like he's the real deal. Caden Gooley could be the kind of guy on this blue line that makes a huge difference. Jordan Harris is a blue liner as well. Sean Farrell, Jan Mysak. All of these players can end up being NHL level. Sure, are they star players? The only one that to me I think it looks like he could be a star level player at the NHL is Caden Gooley if everything goes his way. For Montreal, they do need to add some more draft picks. Again, at the deadline, I would think they're going to do that. They may very well look for a first with Sherratt, but did they get it? So that's the predictor here. Will they be able to get a first-round draft pick for Sherratt? Who else do they move, and do they move players with term? Does Gallagher end up going? Did they end up looking at moving Hoffman? Did they end up looking at moving maybe Josh Anderson? Maybe somebody calls for him, and it's a deal you just can't refuse. Let me know who you think Montreal ends up moving at the deadline, what the plan should be moving forward, and another question for you as well. Can this team bounce back next year, get back into the playoff hunt? This year's been completely miserable, a total write-off from the start of the year. And so since it's that, can they get back to being a competitive team and in the running for and maybe secure themselves the playoffs in the Nightmare East? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.